Good afternoon. How are we? Good. Thank you so much for being here. I'm sure all of us are ready to learn something new today, right? That's why we're all here. Today we have Brianna Moore. Thank you so much for being here. She's going to teach us spring cleaning, safe disposing, and recycling. So please pay attention. She has a wonderful presentation. If you haven't stopped in the back, we have water, snacks, little handouts, giveaways. But please enjoy, and we're happy to have you. So welcome.
Thanks. Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me okay? No, not really. I'll try to project. Maybe come a little closer. But my name's Brianna Moore. I work in the Resource Recovery and Energy Division within Will County's Land Use Department. And I'm currently our recycling program specialist. As far back as February, I started. So I'm still a little bit new to this topic myself, but I think I've been able to gather a lot of information since then. And I'm happy to share a little bit more with you about recycling and other safe disposal options that we have available for residents within our county. So with that, I'll go ahead and hop into our presentation. Just a quick overview of what I hope to cover with all of you this afternoon. I'll explain a little bit more about my division, what we do, and then I'll get into a couple definitions related to recycling, what it is, why we like to do it. After that, I'll hop into some different categories that we consider when we think about recycling. There are different avenues that different types of items should usually go in order to make sure they're more reliably recycled. That includes traditional curbside recycling, which is anything to do with that bin that you have at home. Then there's also some special items that don't necessarily go into your curbside recycling, but that can still be recycled through other means. That's especially electronics and batteries, and then different household hazardous wastes. That's really anything like cleaning products, lawn care, automotive fluids, things that really shouldn't be like poured down the drain, for example. So there's some different ways to handle a lot of that kind of waste. And I'll be able to share a bit more with you on the different avenues we have available for you to use for that. And then feel free to ask me any questions at the end. I'll do my best to answer them as best as I can, okay? So first, a bit about my division. I mentioned that we're in the land use department, so we are part of the local government here. We were formerly the Waste Services Division back in 1988 when we were first created. And a lot of our focus has been on helping to manage the municipal solid waste within our county. So generally, anytime you throw anything in the trash, we kind of have to figure out what to do with it so that it's not just out in the environment. So we also have more recently joined initiatives related to energy, considering energy is another resource we want to be more careful with. So we do also have some programming related to energy efficiency and conservation. But for the most part, generally, our focus areas tend to be anything related to recycling or safe disposal options for residents within our county, energy efficiency topics, and then we also do some short and long-term planning, variety of topics that all are kind of environmental in some nature, but that have to do with helping to make sure our natural resources, when we use them, get to places where they need to go. So speaking of recycling, we can kind of just start with what that even really means, what we're talking about when we refer to recycling. And the EPA's definition is something like collecting different materials that, again, we generally don't want to keep around if we don't feel that we have some use for them anymore. And taking those things that we consider trash and either repurposing or somehow transforming them into something that we can use again, into new usable products. Same definition with fewer words is just converting waste into reusable materials. And that can be a variety of different items. I see we've got like plastic bottles. The pens I have over here on the table are actually made out of recycled plastic water bottles. So taking an empty plastic bottle doesn't have as much use for you anymore, turning it into something that is useful, like a pen. Some of you may be familiar with this symbol with the chasing arrows. That's kind of a universal sign of recycling. Although technically not everything that has that symbol on it is actually recyclable. Maybe it's actually made of recycled materials. Maybe it's just informing you about what the material is that comprises that item. But in any case, usually when people see that symbol, they think of recycling. And so from there, now that we have an idea what it is, why do people like to recycle things in the first place? It generally takes a bit more effort to recycle things versus throwing everything in the trash. So that added value that comes from recycling, in part, is related to making use of our natural resources. So if we recycle, say, like our water, our minerals that we've extracted from the ground, timber from the trees that grow in our environment, being able to recycle that makes it so that we don't have to go back out into the environment and continue extracting more of those finite resources. We also tend to save quite a bit of energy. It takes less energy to reuse materials as opposed to, again, going out to extract brand new materials in many cases. Additionally, recycling helps us promote a healthier community and a healthier environment. So all of those processes tied with grabbing new materials from the environment can have some environmental harms, so that the less that we need to do that to meet our daily needs is generally the better for us. Also, it can help us reduce a lot of the air and soil and water pollution that could often come from having to gather materials from our environment. And then lastly, recycling is tied up with jobs, and not just my own, being a recycling program specialist, but we have people that work in facilities that sort through the recycling. We have people who come to your curb to pick up your recycling. I think it's an estimated 600 to 700,000 jobs in our country that are tied to recycling. So if we support recycling, we're also helping to support our economy. And so next thing I have here is just to think, okay, if you're out, say you go to your favorite coffee shop, if you drink coffee, maybe tea, more people drink tea. If you drink tea and you go to your favorite tea shop for it, they give it to you in a paper cup, and you get to enjoy your beverage on the go, but then later on, you've just got this cup. You don't really know if it's very useful for you anymore. What do you do with that? Sometimes people just throw it away. Sometimes they think maybe they can recycle it. Maybe they'll try to put it in the recycling bin. Sometimes there's a lot of confusion around what exactly to do with materials like these. Same thing goes for batteries, especially like lithium-ion batteries that go into cell phones and the like. Another thing, people aren't always sure if they can just throw that in the trash, if there are special places that take them, if it's okay to put that in the recycling bin. If you're really handy with cars, you say you change your own car oil. When you have that leftover oil that you don't really know what to do with, again, is that something that's safe just to throw in the trash? Is it okay to put that in your recycling bin? People usually come to me with all kinds of questions related to that, all having to do with what you're supposed to do with these items once you're done using them. And so just to go over some of the different categories for different kinds of products where they go, I'll walk through some of those with you right now, actually. So first, we'll look at traditional curbside recycling. As I mentioned earlier, this has to do with anything that you can put in a bin that you have at your house that somebody comes to pick up from your home. You may notice this recycling bin here. His name is Loop. I also have a live model of him over here. He is actually our recycling mascot, and he's been helping our region learn a bit more about the kinds of materials that we can put in our recycling bin. There are certain things that he really likes to eat, like certain papers, like certain plastics. Those are all things that can generally go in your curbside recycling bin. But there are other items that give him cart burn or things that kind of make him sick are essentially things that should not go in your curbside recycling bin. Maybe there are other ways to recycle them, maybe not quite so yet, but in any case, there are some things that we should try to avoid putting in our curbside recycling. So let's look at some of those together. First, starting with some of those things that generally across the board are pretty safe to put in your curbside recycling bin. So those are a lot of things like certain metal items, especially those that are in like food packaging. So aluminum and steel and tin metals, food trays, at least those that are clean from food, tin cans, soda cans, even aluminum foil. Those are some things that generally different haulers will take for recycling. Aluminum itself is actually very highly recyclable, near infinitely recyclable. And recycled aluminum can essentially be converted into other products and back on shelves in as few as 60 days. So we definitely like to encourage people to put any like small metal items in their recycling bins. Also, clean and dry and unshredded paper can generally go in your curbside recycling. So that's like newspapers, junk mail, magazines, and includes the glossy magazines, things like that, empty cartons. If you have shredded paper, that usually is harder to recycle curbside because, it's shredded paper, it kind of gets everywhere. If you blow it around, it's hard to get that into the recycling stream. So we generally recommend that if people have a paper bag, they can put all of the shredded paper into it, then staple it closed, and you can actually put that in your recycling bin. That makes it a lot more likely that even those little paper bits will get into our recycling stream and stay there. Also, particularly glass bottles and jars. Those are a glass that are made of a kind of different glass material from like mirrors or vases or window glass or even those like Pyrex dishes. So bottles and jars generally can be recycled curbside, but those others that are mentioned usually have a different like melting temperature. So it's a little bit trickier to put all of those in the same stream, which is why we kind of just focus on bottles and jars for glass in the single recycling stream. And then plastics. These are kind of tricky because plastics come in all different kinds of forms and have all different kinds of properties. So generally, things that come in bottles or jars or jugs or tubs are pretty safe for the most part to put in your curbside recycling. Especially if you look somewhere on that packaging and see that chasing arrow symbol with a number in it. That number is especially helpful to know like what kind of plastic you've got. Usually ones that have a number 1 or a number 2 within those chasing arrows. Those are generally the most easy to recycle. So we especially encourage people to recycle those kinds. Other kinds of plastics, they go 1 through 7. So that 3 through 7 can be a little bit iffier. That kind of depends on what your waste hauler is able to accept. And then with plastics and really all of these kinds of materials, if you're able to rinse them out of, with any like food residue, doesn't take a ton of water. It doesn't have to be absolutely pristine, but usually just a quick rinse should be just fine to try to reduce some of the contamination that can come with leftover food residue. So let's also look a little more closely at certain things that really shouldn't go in your curbside recycling bin. Some of these are items that are more of a hazard for people that work in recycling. So things that are really sharp, like leftover needles or even broken glass. Those are the kinds of items that we try to discourage people from putting straight into their recycling bin. Additionally, things like plastic bags and what we call tanglers. So those are like maybe really stringy or otherwise loose kinds of materials like garden hoses, Christmas lights, ropes, and chains. We generally try to discourage people from including those in their curbside recycling because they get tangled in a lot of the machinery that we use to sort through different recycled materials at the recovery facilities. So we generally try to encourage people to have other means to recycle some of those. I mentioned plastics are kind of tricky. So, like plastic utensils, I think for those, it's more of the shape. It's kind of harder to keep those in the recycling stream. Plastic cups and clamshells, like takeout containers, are also kind of tricky. I'm still figuring those out myself. Some haulers are able to take them. Others really don't want them. So that's kind of a case-by-case basis. Most cases, it's probably better to try to avoid using them. And then if you're just not sure, it might be fine just to keep it out of the recycling stream so that we can try to keep that as clean as possible. Used diapers, definitely don't want to recycle those. It's fine to throw those in the trash. And then organics like lawn clippings, yard waste, plants, and then food and liquids are usually better to compost instead of putting in your curbside recycling if you have that capability. So that's just a few things. I think I've got more here. Yep. So clothing, although those can usually be reused if you donate them to like a thrift shop. They don't belong in curbside recycling, kind of like the tanglers, they get caught into everything. So it's best to donate those where you can. Batteries, we'll look at that a little bit more closely, both batteries and electronics further in the presentation. Not in curbside, but we have other avenues for you to recycle those as well. Same with scrap metal and compressed gas tanks. All of that is related more so to safety within the material recycling facilities. That's where things that you put in your recycling bin end up. A lot of those kinds of items, just cause harm to the machines and can be more of a health hazard for the people that are working there. Wood, same story. And then styrofoam, that's another one that people sometimes don't think about. Styrofoam more so just can't be recycled within the machinery that is curbside. So there are also special drop-offs, especially for styrofoam. So those are another thing that kind of have to take a different avenue to recycle those. And then appliances, especially those that have refrigerants, like refrigerators or dehumidifiers. Often because those refrigerants are so tricky to handle, there are other special programs related to recycling your leftover appliances. So that can kind of be a lot to remember, especially if you don't look at this on a day-to-day basis. So at least in the state of Illinois, we do have a general guide, traditional recycling guidelines, that help to try to remind people what kinds of items they can generally include in their curbside recycling bin, as well as so things that are either better to be recycled through other means or that are actually better just to go into the trash. And so I just thought I would point out that a good place to look for additional information specific to your home, aside from contacting the county, is to contact your waste haulers directly. I just included a couple of communities that seem to be tied to this group and the haulers that currently are contracted with them. Both Homewood and WM have websites where they dive more deeply into the kinds of materials that they're able to accept given their current machinery. And so that's just a helpful resource I've linked to. I'll try to be sure everybody gets a copy of the slides so that you can also click through that in your own time. Then also with the county, if you live in a community that otherwise does not have curbside recycling available, we have a few drop-off sites, different places around the county where you can take materials like these for recycling. And so I have a few of them listed here. There are additional on the next slide. I would think New Lenox Township is probably the closest location for most of you. But Shanahan, Braidwood, if you know anyone all the way out in Crete, we've got a spot out there too through the Lions Club, although they only take number 1 and 2 plastic containers in addition to the other kinds of materials. But that's a handful of some of them. Have some more on the next slide here that you can refer to. If you know anybody who lives in any of these other communities, we try to make those available for residents. You can also make use of any of these sites, no matter where you live in the county, no matter where these sites are in the county, as long as you are a resident within the county or you live in a community that is at least partially within our county, you're free to make use of any of the resources that we have available. And this is also free of charge, so we won't charge you for using these resources here. So I think that's all for curbside recycling. So for those items that you really can't recycle curbside, we'll look right now more specifically at electronics and some batteries. We've got some special resources tied to those. And so it may surprise you to learn that electronics have actually been banned from landfills in Illinois for probably over a decade now. It's because a lot of these types of devices have like minerals or other items within them that are really not good to have just floating in our environment, like lead and mercury. So we try to contain that as much as we can. That's besides the fact that a lot of electronics also have more valuable metals like silver or even gold, albeit in very small amounts, but when we've got large quantities of things, that becomes kind of a substantial amount of valuable material that we're leaving to send to landfills. So, so we try to keep items, these are the ones that are specifically listed on the EPA's website as being banned from landfills. All of these items and some additional ones we collect through our electronics recycling program. So if you've got any devices like these or more that you're looking to clean out of your house, we have avenues for you to safely recycle those. I kind of just say for the most part, really anything that has a cord attached to it, we're able to recycle. Although you'll probably want to ask me specifically about products that have a battery embedded within them, and also medical equipment. Sometimes that varies a little bit. But yeah, generally anything with the cord for the most part, we're able to recycle. And then I want to say in the past year or two, we also can take small scrap metal items. So that's generally like keys or old bakeware, even old or torn window screens we can take now, as well as batteries. And so similar to the other drop-off locations I mentioned, we also have electronics drop-offs available throughout the county. These have different dates associated with them, but generally every week we have some kind of option available for people. And again, various parts of the county to try to make that as accessible as we can. We have partnerships with all of these entities in order to have sites to offer that. So we're very grateful to work with other local governments to make this available for everybody. And then if those aren't accessible for you, the county also organizes one-day events a few times a year. I would say Recyclepalooza is usually our largest one because we take not only electronics, but we also take household hazardous waste, we take scrap metal, we take wood, we take styrofoam. We usually partner with Sheriff Festival County to take like clothing donations, food pantry donations, other kinds of items as well. So the next one is coming up on September 12th in New Lenox. Those are always on Saturdays. So if you'd like to mark your calendar for that, we're planning to be there. Also, we have electronics and household hazardous waste events that are kind of similar to Recyclepalooza, except we don't take quite as many different types of items. That's just electronics and hazardous waste. Again, we do those a few times a year. Next one is in Wilmington in October. And then if those aren't accessible to you. Maybe those dates are not ideal for you. We'll also have electronic specific one-day events as well. Those are usually in Shorewood because the electronics contractor that we currently work with has a warehouse in Shorewood. And we do those again also like a few times a year. Next one is also September, but it's the 26th if the other dates don't work for you. And then we also have, or I shouldn't say we, other companies, usually private companies, also have at your door services. If you're not able to bring the devices you're looking to recycle to particular sites. Usually contacting your waste hauler or even contacting the county's hauler can help get you services related to that. The only downside is that they charge a fee for these services. I know A-Team Recyclers, that's our contractor, charges about $40 for a TV, for example. So sometimes it's a little bit more expensive depending on what community you're living in. But that's at least one avenue available if you're not able to, get certain items out of your home. I mentioned we would talk a bit more about batteries. And you may know that there are lots of different kinds of batteries that you might encounter in your day-to-day life. And so now, thanks to a partnership between the state of Illinois and the Battery Network, that's a nonprofit, we have more options available for people to drop off different kinds of batteries. And so you'll probably run into a lot of different kinds depending on what kinds of technology you have access to. Usually the lithium-ion batteries, the first one listed here, you can find those in cell phones, power banks, a lot of different items. Those are ones we try to encourage people to be especially careful with. Really, none of these batteries you should put in the trash or curbside recycling because when they're jostled around in, say, like a garbage truck or at a recycling facility, if they're around other kinds of materials that can puncture it or otherwise cause a lot of impact to it, it can actually start fires. And you can imagine that's pretty dangerous for people working in these facilities at all different steps of the way. So I'll talk about what to do with your batteries, but at least for now, just know the trash and curbside recycling are not the safest ways to dispose of batteries. You may also see nickel metal hydride and nickel cadmium batteries that are found in maybe like slightly larger items, like cameras, game controllers. I know especially the nickel cadmium ones, that cadmium can be toxic if released into the environment, so we try to recycle that. Also small sealed lead acid batteries, those tend to be larger, and lead, you can probably guess lead is something we don't want escaping out into our environment, so we like to recycle those. Then probably that last one, the single-use batteries might be one of the more common kinds of batteries that you run into. So that includes alkalines. Those are the little like AA, AAA batteries that you would put into like TV remotes, things like that, as well as the really small coin and button cell batteries, and then lithium ion or lithium primary, which I guess are slightly different from lithium ion. But yep, those are other kinds of batteries you might encounter. All of these are recyclable through the battery network now. And so when you are using devices and the batteries are depleted, you'll generally want to try to store your batteries in a place that's cool and dry. That makes it less likely that they'll react to anything. And it's usually good to try to recycle them maybe twice a year if you're able to. And then in order to prepare them to be recycled, certain kinds of batteries and other batteries beyond a certain size, it's usually good to put tape in on either terminal. So for those really small batteries, usually the terminals on either side of the battery, it's good just to I guess I'll say either put tape on those terminals especially if you have like clear packing tape or duct tape. That's less likely to fall off during transport. You'll want to tape the terminals so that they're less likely, again, to react if they are being transported somewhere, being jostled around. Won't necessarily, they'll be less likely to react to anything that's happening to them during transport. Also, for those like batteries that might be a little bit larger, maybe putting them individually into small plastic bags is also another way to try to protect those terminals and make them a little bit safer for recycling. I've listed here the batteries that you will always want to try to protect if you can. All of the lithium batteries, the coin and button cell batteries, the lead acid batteries, the nickel-related batteries, only over 9 volts is usually the ones you'll want to protect, as well as alkaline and non-lithium batteries over 12 volts. So actually the really tiny, I'll say the smaller alkaline batteries, it's not the end of the world if you don't put tape on those, but I would just say if you're ever in doubt, you'll probably want to tape the terminals just to be safe. And then there are different battery drop-off sites available through the battery network. They've got a site locator, I think I have on the next slide, yep, where they have a variety of locations around the county that have agreed to host, let me go back to the other one, boxes like those at the very end of the slide there. They'll have these set up for you to, drop off your batteries in there, and the site will recycle those every once in a while.
How long has that been? I've never seen one.
Oh, yeah, this is pretty recent, like maybe within the past year or so. And so yeah, we've been like trying to do more to set up more sites and to build more awareness about these sites too. So it's a relatively newer thing, but yeah, we've got those options available. They'll often have little bags or maybe even some tape on site too if you forget to tape your terminals before you put them in the box, and then the battery network takes care of it from there. So I have some other guides related to battery safety that you might find useful in the links here. And again, I'll make sure everybody has copies of these once we're done today. Oh, yep. This map here is online, so anybody can access it. It'll show all of the different locations that have, some kind of agreement with the battery network to collect batteries. Some of them take different kinds of batteries, so you want to double check that the site you're looking at actually takes the battery that you have. Some of them maybe only take those, what we call small format batteries. That's usually the smaller things, versus like medium format batteries that you might find with like e-bikes or lawnmowers, electric lawnmowers. So just double checking that the site you're looking at takes the kinds of batteries that you are looking to recycle is good to do. And then there are some sites on there, albeit a few, but there are some that actually take damaged and defective batteries. So generally those are batteries that, are like deformed in some way. Maybe they're really puffy, maybe there's something leaking from them, if they have a really bad smell or are like releasing some kind of vapor or smoke. You'll definitely want to stop using that battery as soon as possible because it could be pretty hazardous. If you want to put that somewhere where it's away from other people or from things like, sunlight or heat sources that could cause it to react further, maybe sitting it somewhere safe outside until you can put it into like a substance that it is less likely to react with. So like maybe some kitty litter, clean kitty litter to be sure. If you want to put that to make sure it's all covered up in there before taking it to particular sites that take damaged and defective batteries, that's usually a safe way to go about that. I have 18 recyclers information on here. Again, they're our electronics contractor that we have with the county currently. They have a special kit that allows them to take care of damaged and defective batteries. So if you ever encounter any, I would recommend reaching out to them or to any of the other site locations that, that specifically take damaged and defective batteries. So I think that's enough for electronics and batteries. We'll pivot a little bit and look more closely at household hazardous wastes. While some of these can be recycled, there are others, especially the more like toxic substances that we really don't recycle. We just have methods to safely dispose of them, either like neutralizing them or even incinerating them to make sure they're not a hazard to other people and to our environment. So looking more closely at those, again, when I refer to household hazardous wastes, I'm generally talking about, say, like cleaning products or lawn care items, automotive fluids, things that can be helpful for a very particular purpose, but if they're not used for their intended purpose, they can be toxic to humans, toxic to animals, and toxic to the environment if they were to be released, either by pouring them down the drain or throwing them in your trash. So these are some of the items that you'll probably encounter that we considered hazardous waste in our state. Next slide has some additional ones. Perhaps I would say paint is probably one of the most common ones, particularly oil and water-based paints. Latex paint is actually not considered hazardous in the state of Illinois. We take them generally at our sites, but it's actually okay just to solidify that with like some kitty litter or some sawdust. Once it's solid, it's actually safe to put in your trash. But again, that's latex paint. Other kinds of non-latex paint, we would prefer that we have special ways of disposing of that. Pool chemicals, propane tanks, as you can see, all of those. Say especially items that have mercury in them. So that's like your thermostats or especially fluorescent light bulbs. We have ways to safely handle those as well.
Wow.
So this should look familiar. These are the county's one-day events where we take hazardous waste of all of these different kinds. We offer these a few times a year, as I mentioned. So people often will just gather all of their electronics and all of their hazardous waste and get rid of all of it in one fell swoop. That's definitely an option that we have available for residents within our county. For hazardous waste particularly, the state of Illinois has some additional permanent locations that people can take these items to. They're dispersed in different areas around the state, but the two that are the physically closest to us, one is in Naperville, and they're open on the weekends. And the other is in Chicago on Goose Island, and they're open certain days during the week and during the month. A lot of people think that they're kind of far away, but again, these are the two that are closest to us in the state, and they're open usually more year-round than like our one-day events. And then for paint specifically, we have some new legislation this year so that now through Paint Care, it's another nonprofit, they are able to partner with different retail locations to accept paint and certain other paint-related products for recycling. Similar to the battery network, they have a locator with a map so that you can enter your zip code and find the location that's closest to you. The only thing they ask is that any products that they accept that you want to take to these locations are in their original manufacturer's container so that the recyclers know what they're dealing with. Usually sites will want that container to be 5 gallons or fewer, and that it has a lid on it. I think that might be more so for transport so that it doesn't spill everywhere. And then I just have a few of the locations that are in our county that generally accept paints under the paint care program. So if you're familiar with any of these, you like to frequent them, you can always inquire with them to see if they'll take paint for recycling, or try to find them on the locator. It usually has some contact information and some additional details they might want you to keep in mind when you drop them off.
Oh.
So I also linked to that locator here. You can always check that out if you're interested. And then I'll just go over a couple of other things that I couldn't really fit anywhere else on the slide or on the presentation because they're a little bit special. These are items that are considered hazardous, but that we don't take at our one-day events. So I mentioned way earlier our medical sharps or needles that you may have left over. We don't take them at our sites. But generally, it's safe to collect them in a rigid plastic container, say like a leftover detergent bottle. You can just store your needles in there for the time being, gradually accumulate them, and then once your container is about 3/4 full, you can just put the cap back on your container. Try to seal it closed with duct tape just to make sure it doesn't fall off, and then that can actually go into your trash. We say rigid container because, for obvious reasons, we want to keep it contained where someone won't accidentally prick themselves when they're handling the needles. Ammunition, so like, bullets or things like that. Generally, law enforcement offices have some kind of guidance related to that. So I would reach out to them if you have any like leftover ammunition. And then fireworks and other explosive items, same, I would say fire departments usually have some kind of program related to that. But for items like that, it's actually safest just to use it up for whatever purposes that you had them for. But if for whatever reason that's not an option for you, then law enforcement or the fire department would be the first place I would contact for some further support. Additionally, gas cylinders, at least those that are not propane tanks. We take propane tanks, at least the handheld ones, the small, like fewer than 5-pound ones at our events. And then the Naperville location takes propane tanks that are, I think, up to 20 pounds they'll accept there. But for other kinds of compressed gas tanks like helium or oxygen, we don't accept those at our events. But usually it's good to try to either contact the manufacturer or the site where you purchase them from to see if they have any avenues for recycling or safely disposing of those tanks. And that's particularly if you still have some gas within the tanks. But if those containers are actually empty, it actually might be okay just to take them to a scrap metal recycler. Maybe they'll cut it in half to make it easier or try to remove the valve. But that's one way to try to recycle the metal container itself if the container no longer has any gas in it. Smoke detectors are also a little bit funny because they have a really small amount of radioactive material within them. We don't accept them at our events, but you could always, again, try to contact the manufacturer that created the smoke detectors. And at least for now, the guidance is actually that it's okay just to remove the battery and still dispose of it in the trash. I don't really know why, but I guess maybe there's a small enough amount that it's actually not too harmful. Although they do, again, want you to remove the battery at least for recycling. So I did recently learn about a company that takes smoke detectors for recycling out in Wheeling, which is actually quite a bit far north. So maybe is in or out of the kind of radius you would be looking for. But we're looking to have more avenues for smoke detectors, hopefully at some point in the future. And then fire extinguishers, again, we don't take them at our one-day events, but we do have a few drop-off locations within the county, similar to electronics, that will accept old or slightly used fire extinguishers. Again, New Lenox Township, they are really our best friend here because we can drop off a lot of things with them. They've been a really strong partner of ours. And again, that's probably the closest one to this location, maybe second to Peatone, I would guess. But yep, we've got fire extinguisher avenues available as well. And so I've covered a lot of different kinds of items and maybe didn't even quite cover something that you're wondering about. But we do have lots of resources available on our website. It's willcountygreen.com. We also have our green guide that has a drop down if you're curious about items, where to recycle or dispose of them, who to contact for that. We have this pretty large database with some information related to that, if you're looking for something more specific maybe. And I think that's everything. So I'm happy to take any questions you may have. If you have any, I'll do my best to answer them. And otherwise, thank you so much for your attention today.